Hey Emma,
Yes, Madelyn.
what do you call the classic indie game about a small town girl living in a lonely world?
I don't know. What do you call it?
Journey! Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
Listeners, you missed Emma going through the stages of grief with that joke.
I was like, why? What's Journey? I had forgotten that's the band name.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't think the song is called that, Madelyn.
I should have made reference to some other Journey song too, but I didn't want the joke to be like a whole paragraph. Anyway, listeners, I'm your alone in the desert host, Madelyn.
I'm your alone on a space station host, Emma.
And welcome to the show. This week we're going to be talking about the classic 80s band Journey.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Classic 2012 video game Journey. And this year's Citizen Sleeper. So, cue up your dope soundtracks. Get ready for some existential experiences of different varieties.
Yep.
The mashup game will have to have a moderate amount of text.
Yeah. A normal amount of text, yeah.
Just split the difference.
Very Three Bears approach.
Is that what we call it? A Three Bears approach?
That's what I'm calling it now.
I like that. I like that as a good philosophy. I don't know. All right.
Taking the Three Bears approach to life.
Well, it's raining here, so it's not very correct atmospheric for Journey, but that's okay. Let's talk about Journey.
All right.
So, it's a 2012 adventure game from That Game Company, led by creative director Genova Chen, which I think is so funny. I think it's so funny that he was like, let me name myself after Final Fantasy VII. But that really is how he picked his name.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Why not?
Anyway, originally for PlayStation 3, as one of the early successes of the PlayStation Network, and now also on PlayStation 4, on Windows, and funnily enough, on iOS. I guess That Game Company's current game is a mobile game. But wow, a lot of disdain for mobile games in interviews about Journey's 10th anniversary.
Really?
Well, and just in general. I read one of the team talked at some point about how some of the impetus for making Journey came out of Farmville. And somebody at Zynga giving a talk where they were like, all you indie developers, like, stop what you're doing and come work with us and come make some money. And they were like, this isn't what being a social game has to be. A social game can be something else. And then they made Journey. So, pretty obvious if you play Journey that it was inspired by Farmville.
Yeah, I think so.
Pretty clear.
I think it's pretty obvious, yeah.
Farmville, I guess, has to make it into the old game hat at some point, huh?
Man, you're right. That's a good idea. Does Farmville still exist?
I don't think
I'm
so.
gonna have to look it up for myself when we're done.
I'm pretty sure it's gone.
Ugh. A tragedy.
The idea that I would have to have, like, signed up for Farmville on my Facebook account in the year 2022 for the podcast is pretty embarrassing.
Look forward to it.
Anyway, Journey is one of those games that makes you say, like, haven't they talked about that on the podcast already? Like, when I remembered this was the game for this week, I was like, no, like, that can't be right. Like, we've definitely already talked about Journey, but it only came out in 2012, so we couldn't have already talked about it.
Nope. Yeah, we're getting to games that are. It's always weird when I'm like, man, PS3 games.
Yeah.
10 years old. Ooh.
Headed to 5th grade.
Yeah.
So in Journey, you may have encountered Journey before if you're someone who has had a PlayStation at any point in the past 10 years, I think. Or seen its visuals around or heard its music. But in Journey, you play as a mysterious robed figure, and you're traveling through the desert to a mountain. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. That is it.
And so if that summary makes you go, yes, games can be art, well, you're right.
Yeah. So, so Journey was that game company's third game. They had a 3-game deal with Sony, basically, like, out of college.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they made some thesis games, and Sony was like, that's cool, and they ended up in, like, a partnership where they were to release 3 games for Sony platforms. So the first one was Flow, the second one was Flower, which is my personal favorite, and the third one was Journey, and then they went bankrupt for a while.
Pretty missed opportunity there not to make a game called Flowist as the third one.
Why? Oh, I get it.
I realize flower is not pronounced as flower.
Oh.
But I really do think it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah,
not make
you're
flow,
right.
flower,
Definitely.
flowist. But whatever. Yeah. Journey has a lot of flow to it, so you could have called it, like, flowist. I don't know.
I don't think that would have been as, like, attention-grabbing.
Set it at a river. I don't know.
Also, they do, like, their latest game has, like, a subtitle to it, which is very fancy for them.
Yeah.
But their first 3 games, they really just were just like, this is the concept.
Yep.
Like, Flow, like, started out as, like, a thesis game on, like, the flow state, essentially, in games, which is, like, the thing you want your player to get in so that they are, like, adequately challenged. Like, they're not bored and they're not frustrated, right? Mm-hmm. You're in the flow state. The second one's about flowers, and this one is just the hero's journey.
I love, too, that... So, this game comes out a few years after Roger Ebert's famous Games Aren't Art proclamation. And mm-hmm. somebody, like, sent him a message, like, no. Like, you've got to play Flower. Like, Flower is art. And he was like, this is a greeting card.
This is a greeting card?
Yeah.
Wow. Man, I can't believe he thinks greeting cards aren't art.
That is the real controversy of that statement, isn't it? Yeah.
He got, like, a really mean, like, birthday card or something.
Yeah,
one of those,
people
like,
send him now
you're over the hill or whatever.
Cards. You're old and you stink.
So he was feeling petty that day. I understand.
Flower, to be clear, does not share much with a greeting card that says you're old and you stink.
No, it doesn't.
But yeah, Journey, despite, now being, like, incredibly classic and pretty much immediately being incredibly classic, does not sound like it was a fun time to work on at all.
No. Yeah, you can talk about that.
So, Sony was originally like, okay, for this third game, like, make it in a year. And that's, like, they knew from the start, apparently, like, that wasn't really going to be realistic. But the original plan was they should make it in a year. Instead, it took more than 3. And everybody pretty much, like, was fighting with each other all the time and hated each other. And, like, originally they were going to set the game in a forest, but, like, that was going to take way too much time and money to draw, so they made it a desert. Right? Like, a lot of the things that are really great and iconic in this game seem to have come out of, and this is an oversimplification, of course, but seem to have, in part, come out of the fact that they had no money and were incredibly, like, over time on how long this game was supposed to take to make. So they had all these ideas, like, the main character was originally going to be a lot more, I say photorealistic in heavy quotes because it's the PlayStation 3, but was originally going to be a lot more, like, fully animated, fully designed. In the real game, it doesn't have arms and has stick legs.
They've talked about the lack of arms as a purposeful choice, not something that cut out because of development time.
But see, I've seen it talked about in different interviews in both ways, so I wonder which came, chicken or the egg situation.
I guess so.
Which, again, it can be a purposeful choice and also one that they were like, let's save a few $1,000s not having to animate some arms. But it was interesting to see how much of this is like bad, right? Like in some ways, like I really like the design aesthetic of like give yourself some limitations and like see what you can do with it, right? That's why I do theater work, because that's like what theater is mostly. But it's kind of bad when that comes out of like, we had no money and Sony was like, this game should have been finished 6 months ago. So overall, it sounds like people really were not getting along by the end of this. There was no money left. Like by the end, they were like more or less working for free just to get the game out. And then they did get the game out and they were like, great, everybody go find new jobs.
Well, they didn't really say that. They said we can keep you employed. We just won't pay you for a while until we figure out how to get some more funding.
Yeah.
So a lot of people did leave. More than like a mass firing. It was more like a, well, it's up to you.
And so then that game company didn't make another game for, I mean, partially because I think Sky is like quite large, right? But like they didn't release
Sky. Well,
game.
Sky's I think being constantly updated. As well.
There was an interesting article where the head of the studio was like, I used to feel like I was a pirate, right? And I would like be going around and like trying to carve out something new and like steal things. And now we've got this other thing that we have to be updating all the time. And so I don't really quite feel that way anymore. But like in my heart, I'm still a pirate. And I was like, I'm sorry that the mobile games landscape has sucked the soul out of you a little bit there.
People do really like Sky, for what it's worth.
Yeah. Well, it was just interesting to me because, again, there were just all these articles of this guy being like, mobile games have like totally worked against everything I tried to do. I tried to convince people that games are art, and I was sort of doing it, and then mobile games exploded everywhere, and they ruined it for me, and now everyone thinks when I tell them I'm a game developer that I run a casino. They treat me like I run a casino. I was like, dang.
I can see how that would be frustrating.
Yeah.
In the interviews, I'm always a little bit like, okay, man.
Yeah.
In like the like talking about art and like making games for adults. But I do see the frustration of like, especially since he's working on a mobile game that's still intended to be art. But you tell people you work on a mobile game, I can see why they'd be like, oh, okay. Monetization stuff.
Well, it seems to also come out of, the lead developer grew up in China, where the cultural perception of games is even like harsher and more negative than it is here. I mean,
yeah.
Like I feel like in the US, the cultural perception of games has come a long way since Congress was like, games are bad. Right?
Well, I mean, we don't have, strict gaming limit times.
Well, that's
so. That's already like an illustration of the difference in perception there, I think.
So there were a lot of profiles in this guy that were like, he wanted to be able to pursue this in a way that like his parents would still take him seriously, basically.
Yeah.
Like originally he wanted to work at like Pixar because he felt like that was, still going to be like a real job. So I can imagine like doubly so, even more frustrating to be like, I feel like I've worked to change this, and then gotcha ruins it all for you.
Yeah.
But it is also a little dramatic. Anyway, I should talk more about Journey itself. So it is on Talk This Classic, the Wikipedia list of the greatest games of all time.
Of course.
Which, by the way, has had some updates since I last looked at it, I think. Because I remember for a long time Breath of the Wild was the most recent. But now Super Mario Odyssey is on there, the new God of War is on there, and Red Dead 2. Also, I didn't remember Stardew Valley being on there, but it is.
There you go.
So, still nothing more recent than, you kind of have to be about 5 years old to crack the list, it seems.
That makes sense. You have to see how cultural perceptions settle,
I guess. Some games are an instant classic, though. I feel like Journey probably could have popped onto the list right when it was released.
Sure.
Back in the days where you could just release a 2-hour super simple game and it was like revolutionary.
Yeah.
It's not a dig at Journey. It's just, it's so interesting to read the reviews of this and have people be like, this is a game unlike any other game that I've seen before. And it's like, it's so interesting how many games have taken, if not direct inspiration from this. Like a lot of the ideas.
Yeah. I mean, the short playtime is pretty key to Journey, I think, because it is not a game that wants you to play it in multiple sittings, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, like, I feel like you couldn't do that now. I mean, you could. Of course, people release short games now. But you wonder, especially as a game that wants you to finish it in one sitting, and a game that, you know, theoretically is finishable in 90 minutes. But, I mean, not necessarily for every player, but, like, potentially is. I mean, it's on Steam now, right? But you can imagine if this game came out on Steam today, people would be like, I'm gonna finish it and I'm gonna get my refund.
Yep. Yeah.
And everyone online would be like, wah wah, I paid $20 for 2 hours of entertainment. Wah wah.
Journey does have a bit of replayability encouragement. It just doesn't want you to do, like, a session, like a run through of it in multiple sittings.
Definitely. So it's, you know, it's hard to, like, we're talking a lot about, like, all the stuff around the game. Like, it's hard to talk too much about the game because it is so simple, and that's what's so good about it, right? Like, it's just, like, you can walk, you can jump, you can make your wordless sounds.
Yeah.
And the multiplayer is, I think, what's perhaps most innovative and unique about it, at least in the context of today.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is some, like, gameplay, quote-unquote, to Journey, which the main thing is collecting scarf pieces as you go through. So you start out with a really short scarf, but the length of your scarf is basically how much you can fly. Like, it has a certain amount of charged power, and as you add scarf things, it's like you're adding to, like, your stamina meter. Essentially, it's just represented by something on your costume, and that's, like, sort of the main thing. And you use that ability to jump and sort of fly to get through to the mountain, the light on the mountain where you're going. And it's mostly desert, but there's a couple of different, like, there's some stone structures you go through, there's snow on the mountain, so there's a couple of different, like, biomes that you go through on the way there as well. But like you said, the main thing is the multiplayer aspect, which is just, like, you can encounter one other traveler on your journey, and you can journey with them if you would like. And that's it.
But Emma,
you have your little call thing that you can use to draw their attention. The call thing also repowers your companion's scarf. So if you want to glide somewhere long, you can just keep, like, chirping at each other if you want. So there's some encouragement to sticking together there as well.
But Emma, what if journeying with Poop Face 420 really breaks the immersion for me?
You only get to know that you journeyed with Pooh Face 420 at the very end of the credits, so it's fine. It'll only break you out at the end.
I know, like, they talk a lot about kind of the thought that went into it, how much they had to work with Sony to be, like, absolutely sure that you don't see the tag until the end, so you don't get Poop Face 420.
Yeah.
But I still feel like the feeling of being like, oh man, like, it's been me, and, like, I don't know, like, Naruto's wifey 343 or something, like Tifa's boobs 8008. Like, I feel like even learning that at the end, I don't know, maybe it would humanize them, I guess.
Yeah, so they went through a lot of, they have a lot of, like, their prototypes online, which was interesting to watch. It's just, like, little dots, like, moving through a 2D, like, space, like a building map, essentially. Is very, very funny to think like that. Oh yeah, that is how game development starts. Graphics are the first thing finished in a game.
Yeah, we'll say that every week.
But like they were thinking initially like there could be more people, but then they were thinking if there's more than one other person, they could form like a little clique and leave one of the travelers behind, which wouldn't be fun. They're thinking of having like a basic sort of like emoticon communication, like thumbs up, thumbs down, but then they're like, they'll be able to just like spam thumbs down at their companion, and that's not a very good interaction.
Well, and that's what they found with playtesters too. They weren't just like, that's possible. They were like, this is actually what people do.
Yeah. So there was just like all this iteration of like, how will people be mean with this, and how can we create a system where there's this anonymous multiplayer aspect and people aren't mean. Like the worst thing you can do is leave like your traveler companion behind, and that's its own like story thing. But there's no way in Journey really, unless you're really trying, I guess, you could like draw in the sand or something. But there's no way to really be cruel to the person that you meet in Journey, which seems like a harder thing to do than you would initially think.
Yeah, like Emma said, that's why there's no arms, right? There's no like punching each other. They found in playtests that the chirping sound that your character can make, that people interpret that as positive pretty much when they hear it, even if I'm over here doing it being like, Emma, come on, like, get it together. Not that Emma and I could ever repair it together, right? It's random, but yeah, it's really, really interesting how far you have to go out of your way to make sure people aren't awful to each other.
Yeah. Or at least, even if they're trying to be awful to each other, that it's
doesn't read
not
that way.
Easy to read that way. Yeah.
Journey is also very well known for its soundtrack, which is one of the like most acclaimed game soundtracks of all time. Which, I don't know, composing for games just seems like absolutely impossible to me, right? But like I just don't understand how you would ever do it. But the idea being, because there's no text and there's no dialogue, I saw several write-ups about this refer to the music as kind of the narrator, where like you're kind of represented by like a cello soloist, and it interacts with the things that you're doing in the game, right? It's not just like a looping track. As you play the game, the music adapts to what you're doing, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it just seems impossible. Like, just how would you ever do that?
Oh, that's the key part of the game soundtrack. Has to be adaptive.
Yeah, but like that's impossible though. So
you're right, it's not possible. It is really funny to like look at the track list, and a couple of the songs are like, the hero's journey. Just like named after steps, and like the long list of the hero's journey steps, not like the simple one that you probably learn in like high school English, the expanded version. And then like that's not a bad thing. You're making a simple game, and it's like, okay, we'll just go with the very basics down to the very basics of this storytelling system. And it seems like they really, really leaned into that in everything that they did.
I thought it was neat that they did like Journey live concerts. The 80s band. They had somebody play Journey, and the 80s band Journey came and did Journey live with Journey.
Yeah.
No, with a live music play along. And like they had to get the Sony provided like a special copy of the game that like didn't have the soundtrack but had all the other sounds, which I thought was neat. Mm-hmm. And then I thought it was fascinating that like the composer just released a 10th anniversary edition with like the London Symphony Orchestra, right? Which seems like it would be like an official thing. But there was an interview where he was like, no, like the people at that game company are like too busy, so they were like, that's cool, but like have fun, but they were like too busy to be involved. And Sony was just like, sounds cool, good luck. I was like, that's wild. That's wild that you like basically like self-funded and like self-released this like you know, I mean, obviously it has to be totally reimagined for the symphony, right? Because it's way more musicians, and you have to have versions that people can, like, just play through, right?
Yeah.
But, like, just the idea that this, like, totally iconic video game soundtrack, they were, like, everyone involved with it was just like, yeah, dude, like, you do you.
Yeah.
It's weird, man. Games are weird. As someone who works in game development, I have to ask you if this is a good ratio. So they talked about the playtesters and how many of the playtesters cried when they finished the game. Do you feel like a 12% cry rate is, like, good for a game?
You know, I think I did read that, like, 3 out of
25.
Whatever. 25, yeah. I mean, especially because, you know, in a playtest environment, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've got someone watching you, possibly asking you questions as you play.
Yeah.
But also, like, you know, you might be thinking out loud as you're playing it also, and sort of rationalizing those emotions that you're feeling out instead of necessarily feeling them to help the developers. So, you know, that's pretty good, I think, for being in, like, an odd environment playing a game.
So you're suggesting that somebody, like, bullied them to make them cry? Or, like, somebody's...
No. I'm suggesting that I cry easier at movies that I watch by myself than if I'm watching them with someone else.
But not everyone is as
That makes
emotionally
sense.
stunted as you are, Emma.
I'm a very easy crier for media.
I'm
I
just
don't know when
kidding.
it happened, but over the last few years, I've become a very easy crier at media. So, and not emotionally stunted.
It's true.
Just, if someone else is with you, you're probably, like, you know, interacting with them, and your focus is maybe not entirely on the thing that you are experiencing.
Do you think if you go back to a real movie theater, you'll cry at, like, the Cate Blanchett? No, it's not Cate Blanchett. Sorry, Nicole Kidman. Like, opening.
What?
Never mind. I won't get into the AMC Nicole Kidman, like, opening movie that has become a classic, apparently.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's like okay, I'm not gonna do this right now. We'll talk about it later.
Does she, like, tell you to, like, turn off your phone?
Yeah.
Oh, it's that. Okay.
But it's, like, really theatrical.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll cry.
The final thing I wanted to talk about Journey, I mean, okay, so Journey was a huge critical and commercial success. I'm not sure if we said that, but, like, it was. Okay, you probably knew that. But it was really interesting to me to read a lot about how they really intentionally created it so that the emotion that you felt, they talked in several interviews, several members of the team, about how a lot of games, like, have a lot of emotion in them, right? Like, you cry at Final Fantasy games, you cry at, like, whatever, right? But most of the time, that emotion is really confined to the cutscenes, right? It's not while you're playing the game. It doesn't really have anything to do with you playing the game. You're just, like, crying when you see the story in the little movie that they play for you.
Sure.
And so that they particularly wanted to craft with this game something that gave you emotion through, like, what you were doing and what you were playing, or what your partner was playing. I thought that was interesting, and I was trying to think, like, what other games... I don't know, that is one part of this that I don't know, I feel like even though Journey has a lot of influence on kind of just, like, indie games as a whole, I feel like it's really hard to capture that magic in a bottle of, like, the emotion comes through you, the player.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say there aren't any games, but it's something that, like, has not, like, permeated the industry. Anyway, a lot of really touching anecdotes from players about, like, how they interpreted their partner, right? Of, like,
yeah,
you know, having, like, recently lost someone, it being, like, that person coming to say goodbye, or, I don't know, somebody told the lead developer a story about how, like, they drowned in an icy lake and died for 2 minutes, and this game felt like that. I was like,
I don't know how I would take that if someone told me that.
I think it was meant in, like, a positive way.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. No,
But
I'm sure it was.
What a thing to say to someone. I don't know.
Yeah, so one of the things that I thought was, like, fascinating about, like, the culture of it is if you find all of these like hidden glyphs in Journey, if you start again, you can unlock the ability to have a white robe, which if you get to the end of the game, there are these characters with white robes that like help you in the final stage of your journey, essentially. And so like there's a lot of like, oh, and whenever someone's like, I found a white robe, they're like, they always bring me to all the glyphs, you know, they always help me out in every stage. They're just like, and then I got my white robe, and I think that's so wholesome.
Yeah, right. It just comes
like,
back to,
I've done it. Now I'm the leader.
It just comes back to, they talk in things, they're like, yeah, we want someone to be able to be the kid who's like being a little poop head in Call of Duty, and then like comes to this game and like is kind and is encouraged to not be that way.
Yeah.
And I feel like that captures that totally.
Yeah.
So I really meant to play Journey. I'm pretty sure that that Emma owns Journey on the PlayStation 3. But
I feel like I have the one that has all three, the disc.
Yeah, you definitely did. Because I remember Flower being on it. I am pretty sure that I archived that software so that I could download Yakuza Dead Souls, which I haven't played yet.
A worthy trade. Equally artistic.
Basically
value.
The same game. So I wanted to play Journey in addition to playing some of Citizen Sleeper, which I'll talk about as we move to that now. But yeah, I went to the PlayStation 3 and it wasn't there, and like I tried to open the PlayStation Store, and the PlayStation 3 just goes so slow. So I was like, I'm not gonna. It's embarrassing that I like haven't played Journey, right? Like, as someone who's been doing this podcast for 1,000,000 years now, it's embarrassing. So maybe I will play it sometime soon. It feels like it would be a good game for the winter, like a desert game. So
sure.
Maybe I'll do it and like remember what it feels like to be warm.
There you go.
So, shall we talk about Citizen Sleeper?
Let's talk about Citizen Sleeper.
It is a 2022 role-playing game. Action adventure, it says. Although
it calls it action adventure. I don't know where it's getting that from.
Action adventure just means whatever you want it to mean.
It really does.
It's just like, it's a game.
It's a game that has some action and adventure in it. Characters take actions.
They sure do. They have
and go on adventures.
So it's from Jump Over the Age, which is a one-person studio. Gareth Damian Martin, and published by Fellow Traveler for like everything but the PlayStation, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I don't know why, but you know,
it seems mysterious to me. I'm like, you already have a Switch version and an Xbox version. It's my understanding the Switch version is the hard one, but I don't know. I don't know anything about games.
Yeah. It did. I played this on Switch, and it did feel like it was made for computer, for what it's worth. So,
I enjoyed. I'm also playing it on Switch. I brought it with me on the train to play a little bit. It was good for that.
Maybe they've updated it to fix. I had a lot of issues navigating the UI on Switch.
Yeah, I'm not finding it to be the like most easy to navigate, and I am only like maybe somewhere between 10 and 15 cycles in, perhaps. So not very far into the game, and I can only imagine that there become many, many more things to click on.
Yeah. I also just like that I would open the menu and the selector would disappear. I'd had issues with that. Like it would be under the menu on something there. So maybe they fixed that issue.
I've not yet had that problem, but we'll see. I don't play Switch handheld a lot, but when I do, I expect there to be touchscreen elements.
Yeah. There's that too. I wish there was touchscreen on this one.
Anyway, Emma, as someone who... You played this whole game, right? I remember you talking about this.
I played this whole game, yeah.
Do you want to explain what's up?
Sure. So in Citizen Sleeper, you are this entity called a sleeper, which is essentially like they've taken a person who like owes a lot of debt, essentially, but doesn't want to work it off with like their, fragile human body. So what they do is they put this person to sleep, and sort of copies their consciousness over to a sleeper, which is like a robotic body, so that the sleeper can do their work for them. And then when they're done, they can they can get rid of the sleeper and wake the human body, and it's like they never had to do the work, but the debt is gone, essentially. But so you've run away from that responsibility by like freezing yourself to like a cargo hold ship, essentially. And you're sort of rescued by that, by like a junkyard operator who gives you like a box to live in. And you have to sort of work in order to feed yourself, get something called stabilizer, which is essential for your body to work, and just sort of eke out a living on the Eye, which is the space station that you found yourself on, as well as evade anyone who might be coming to take you back, so that you can go back to work.
So kind of an Animal Crossing-like, when you really think about it.
Yeah, definitely Animal Crossing-like. But Tom Nook is a lot meaner. And your neighbors are all poor.
Look, I don't know if you've seen some of the houses of some of my neighbors on Animal Crossing. They'll just put out any junk I give them.
Yeah, that's
Hippo
fair.
isn't poor. Hippo has... Tex isn't poor.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's inspired by the gig economy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And capitalism.
Inspired by capitalism.
That's the thread between the games this week, is like, Journey is like, let me make this game that's inspired by how terrible Farmville makes me feel. Mm-hmm. And Citizen Sleeper is, let me make this game that's inspired by how terrible DoorDash makes me feel.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically it. So Citizen Sleeper, when it came out, a lot of reviews were like, it's like Disco Elysium. And I don't really agree with that a lot in terms of, I see why people used it and why it was probably fine for them marketing-wise, to be associated with a bigger name video game. But really all it has in common is there's a dice element, and I guess capitalism.
Yeah, I'm not getting the impression that, like, I'm
and
sure
a lot of texts.
What?
A lot of text. There's a lot of text in both games.
Yes.
I guess.
I'm not getting the impression that, like, there's going to be a lot of resource management, I'm sure, in terms of, like, keeping myself fed and stabilized, etc. But I'm not getting the impression that it's going to be like Disco Elysium, where it's like, I'm just going to, like, die repeatedly.
You don't really die repeatedly in Disco Elysium.
I haven't played Disco
either.
Elysium, and the only thing that I've really internalized is that it's like, you can't put your tie on, and you die.
Disco Elysium gives you a lot of opportunities to die at the start,
Okay.
once you get into it. I guess in that way it's sort of similar to Citizen Sleeper. But once you get into it, it's like, okay, it's probably not as fun for the player to be dying a lot anymore. Which, I will say, that is one element of Citizen Sleeper that doesn't really work for me. So, like, you'll see as you continue playing, so the way the system works is you get a certain amount of dice every day that you wake up, that you can use these dice, these pre-rolled dice, to expend actions for the day. So you can work, you can not work. Most of it's working.
You can trade them for info, too.
Yes, you can also use them for, like, hacking purposes as well. So the amount of dice you get is based on your current condition. So if you have a good condition, you'll get 6 dice. If you're in a really, really bad condition, you'll get as few as 1 die to work with on a single day. Like, that's how much work you can do. And for stuff like work, generally higher dice are better. And then there's ways you can use lower dice to, like, get information or do safer tasks. So, like, some tasks are dangerous, some tasks are hazardous, some tasks are safe. And these have impact on your hunger and condition based on how well you do
Basically, the idea being that if you have like a 6, you have a 100% chance of getting a positive outcome. And as you go down through the numbers, like the percentages of neutral and negative outcomes increase. And depending on how dangerous the job is, a neutral or a negative outcome has negative impacts on your like robot body.
Yeah. Yeah, so like a safe one, if you get a negative outcome, it doesn't really do anything to you. You just don't get very much out of it.
Wasted it.
But for like a dangerous one, if you get a negative outcome, that probably has an impact on like your condition or your hunger. But one thing I found is if you hit a certain point where you're not struggling to survive anymore. Like, I finished like one story quest, and then I was fine for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm deeply paranoid, having read some of the reviews, that like I'm playing wrong and I should be I'm scared something is gonna happen to me and I've prioritized things in the wrong way and I'm gonna get into disaster trouble. Because right now I just feel like, yeah, like, let's go. Let me get the stuff for the vending machine. Like, no problem. I got all these crappy dice, so like, let's do all of that. And like, let me eat mushrooms all the time because I've got plenty of cryo, which is the currency. I don't know. So everyone at the beginning is like, I struggled so much at the beginning. It was so difficult to balance everything. And maybe I'm just not far enough in yet. But right now I'm like, hey, buddies, friends, let's have a party time.
It's an interesting balance because I think because of like the length and the fact that there's not like a manual save system, there isn't actually much of a fail state for messing up and like losing all of your condition. According to one of the reviews I read, it's like you lose a skill point. You have to take it out of one of your skills if you end up losing all of your condition, and then it like resets you to like middle condition or whatever. So it doesn't really want you to fail.
Right.
I think it doesn't really want you to get to the point where you've actually like totally messed up. But I think maybe that makes it a little bit too easy for what it's trying to say, you know? I got to the point where I was like, hell yeah, gig economy, baby! I love this! By the end.
Yeah.
I have like 3 steady jobs, and all my friends are there.
Yeah, well, you know, the solution to burnout is 2 jobs, right? Did you see that headline?
Yeah, I did. That's so funny.
The article makes a better point, to be fair. The article is talking about, like, knowledge economy workers working 2 full-time jobs simultaneously and, like, sticking it to the man, but the headline is pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Like, on one hand, you want to make a game that, like, critiques the gig economy. On the other hand, if you make a game that is too good of a critique of the gig economy, it's probably not fun.
Yeah.
I guess people do really like hard strategy games, so I don't know. And this game is definitely who's going to be surprised that the game that's about like checking things off your many to-do lists is working for me. But who's going to be shocked by the fact that I'm enjoying that so far? No one. But so far at least. Look, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to eat my words next week on the side quest. I'm going to be like, my character died. I spent too much money on mushrooms. Yeah,
so the way it works is, for story-wise, there's a bunch of, like, segmented stories, essentially, that are around certain characters and certain parts of the space station. These are called drives, so you'll have, like, a list of your current drives on the side, that'll have different tasks that characters want you to complete for them. Or things you have to do, like secure a source of stabilizer, for instance, so that you can, live.
Living is good.
And there's also, like, some progression to access the next part of the space station. You have to save up enough cryo to be able to pay for access to get there. So as you continue to be able to access more of the space station, more stories open up that you can then interact with.
So if you're feeling like you want to try this game, I want to say that I found the beginning of Game Informer's review to be very accurate to my experience, which is that the first part of the game is quite overwhelming, and that there's a lot of text and a lot of tutorials about how the game works, and that it's really all, I think, a lot more intuitive than that makes it seem. I was a little nervous as I was starting to play, and granted, I was starting to play on like the subway, right? So I was like at sort of like 80% attention to the game.
Yeah.
Right? So that was part of, I think, what was making it feel like a little bit like, whoa, like I'm trying to read this, but also there's some kind of station announcement going on, right? On my way to my gig. But I think that the tutorials sometimes, in much the same way as if you're learning how to play like a board game, right?
Yeah.
The tutorials make it seem like it's going to be much more complicated than it is. There's a lot of different things that you can do on any given day, and that's complicated, but the idea of like how the dice work and like the consequences of neutral and negative actions, I think are actually more intuitive than all of the mountains of text pages at first make it seem.
Yeah. I've been a little bit down on it in this. I want to say I did really like this game.
Yeah.
I found the characters and the stories really charming. I really liked, as much as I was like, I don't know, this doesn't really feel like it's criticizing the gig economy too much. I will say that, like, by the end, all of my, like, ways that I was supporting myself was through, like, the connections with people that your character fosters. Like, the station is sort of against you, like, in terms of, like, the people running it, or the way that society is structured. But you're able to find, like, little places where if you help a person, they will then help you, right? In sort of an individualist community building sort of way, rather than like, I got a nice job at a company. It's like me, hanging out with this one person who is now my friend, and I help their business and they give me mushrooms. Or something like that, Yeah,
I think it's probably more accurately described as like a, not necessarily a critique of the gig economy, although, it certainly is just sort of a, like, by necessity, kind of like the idea of like, this is what it is. It's pretty bleak, right? But it's more about kind of like, how do you make that work, right? Given that, like, you, the individual, can't really do anything about it. Like, how do you make a better life within that system? And it's through connecting with people. And now, maybe then you get to critique whether that's too simplistic. But I think
at the same, like, I think it made me think a little bit, like, the idea of working gigs is not necessarily bad.
Right.
If you also had a way to, be given health care. And you're not working for some faceless mega corporation. You're just helping several people that are your friends and that you care about, and you care about each other. And you're just going around like, oh, I'll do my shift at the restaurant, and then I'll do my shift at the repair bay, and then I'll go visit my friend in the commune so that we can plant some mushrooms, Like, that in itself, that doesn't sound bad. I do that. There's something nice about doing a bunch of different stuff. It's just that in doing the bunch of different stuff, can you make it so that you have security and aren't like Uber one day is like, F you, Isn't
it going to be funny when we come back to this podcast a few years and Emma is a mushroom farmer somewhere?
Think about it sometimes, I have too much lower back pain.
I don't even think you particularly do you even like mushrooms?
No, I don't like mushrooms.
What's wrong with you? Okay.
But, sometimes I just, like, you lay back and, like, I could just be a farmer, get in the dirt. That sort of fantasy,
You can train your dog to do the, like, all the bending over stuff.
Yeah.
You can just, like, harvest the stuff above.
Truffle dog.
Truffle dog. The ideal gig. Well, Citizen Sleeper also has a bopping score. It got really very good reviews. So if you're into like a tabletop-inspired gigging, numbers go up kind of game. Mm-hmm. Numbers also go down in this game, but numbers go up, numbers go down. I think
they've been releasing. I think the DLC they've been releasing is free updates. Also,
there's a.
I was thinking I would go back to it once all the 3 they have planned right now have been released. So I'll be curious if you hit the first DLC storyline while you're playing and what that's like.
I don't know if I will know what it is, so I'll have to talk to you about it when I play more. So shall we mash?
Let's mash.
Okay. The text stuff is hard. Moderate amount of text.
Mm-hmm.
Good score. Communal, helping each other.
It should be like an episodic like pilgrimage game. Okay. I don't necessarily mean episodic like the release model, sure. The story structure of like you're going to a place, and maybe it isn't clear at the beginning what this place you're going to is, but you find that out as you go, and like you stop at like different like settlements along the path, or you meet other travelers and you have like little interludes with them as you continue going towards your ultimate destination.
I like that. I have a totally different take to propose.
Sure. Tell me your totally different take.
A sort of a reflective and melancholy take on Crazy Taxi.
I think that's called NeoCab.
Does that exist?
Might be a game that already exists.
Well, I was thinking of it more like you're an Uber driver or whatever. We'll call it Boober or whatever. Like,
I don't think we should call it Boober. I think we should veto that one.
Okay, you're right. You're an Uber driver. And like it's like episodes of like you have different customers and like you kind of learn about them by like the music they play and like how they interact with you, and sometimes you have chatty customers and sometimes you have people like me that you try to make conversation with, but they're just like, yeah. Uh-huh.
I like that too, yeah.
And now, you could incorporate the soundtrack there with like people's music choices, what you learn about them from that. But if that game already exists, that's lame.
There could be more than one melancholy driving game.
Can there? Is there space for more than one melancholy driving game out there?
Yeah, there is.
Let's see. I like yours though. I'm trying to think of like other ways I could go about this. Both of these have gone like text light. Like, what if I go text? What's the text heavy version of this? What's the version that's a little more Citizen Sleeper? Journey is hard. Journey is not quite like Tetris, but it's a little Tetris-y in that it's like pretty simple and hard to mash.
I mean, I think it's a little better than Tetris because it's just like you can say like, oh, if they're going to a place.
Yes,
that's
if there's
the
a
journey
element journey that occurs. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh, you could do one that's kind of like a melancholy, quiet game where it's like kind of sci-fi where you're delivering packages. You're like a DoorDash guy. Has that game already been released?
Death Stranding?
Yeah. Not at all the same. None of the same mechanics. But I'm like, man, we've got a lot of kind of like gig economy journey games.
You know, there's some journey inspiration in Death Stranding.
You're going somewhere. You sure are going somewhere. You're right.
You're going somewhere, yeah. You find like helpful structures left behind by. There's really only positive ways to interact with players in Death Stranding.
Mm-hmm.
You can't leave dislikes on their structures, for instance.
Can you imagine?
I hate this bridge. Why did you build it?
I'm trying to think of like what other gigs, right? Like we've done a lot of stuff with like rideshare, and like I could imagine a similar story that's like you're a food delivery person and kind of like the stories of that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if Netflix advertises like midnight diner at you as much as it advertises it at me, but like that kind of energy, but with food delivery.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to think of like, okay, like what other gigs could I like center it around? Like a task.
I mean, you could do something that's just you're a waiter.
What would that look like? You're a waiter.
You know, you work like the night shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's midnight cafe. People come in, they order weird food. You know, they put quarters into the jukebox that doesn't work or whatever.
You probably do like TaskRabbit too, like a TaskRabbit simulator, but like wholesome.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to just like they sit there and they watch you build a couch for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Although, again, all of these things being wholesome kind of defeats the point a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, you get some... It doesn't all have to be good experiences. You can bring some bad experiences. Especially since all of these are more authored, right? I don't really know how you'd bring, like, the multiplayer aspect into any of these ideas. And like that Citizen Sleeper being so text-heavy sort of precludes that from happening.
It could be an interesting, this is just turning into Overcooked plus delivery, right? Like, if you could do, like, an interesting interaction between the waiter game you proposed and the food delivery driver game you proposed, that, like, things come together, can leave, like, I would say you could leave, like, a little note for the driver, but then you get notes that are, like, suck it, loser. Sometimes, probably.
Do food delivery Overcooked, where you and like one other person who works, you know, like your shift, and you have to make sure to like plan the routes and make sure that you balance the deliveries well.
See, this is turning into a stressful game. I guess Citizen Sleeper has some stress to it.
It's not really time-based stress, though, which I think is maybe a wrong thing to add here.
But maybe then it should be like an Overcooked that's a dice-based Overcooked. Right?
Dice-based Overcooked.
Well, instead of it being, like, you know, like this idea of, like, okay, like, I have a certain amount that I can, like, get done in this amount of time, but it's really more, like, turn-based. And it's like, okay, this is probably realistic. I don't know. I haven't watched Chef on Hulu yet, right? But, like, you have a certain amount you can get done, and by the end of the night, your chopping is not as good, right? So you kind of have to decide, based on the takeout orders that came in, the ones that you're going to do really well, right? Because it's like did you get an order that it seems like it's someone who's been broken up with, right? And should you put a little extra love and care into that one? And then if you don't, right, how does the delivery driver gets these foods that are, you know, prepared to various degrees of accuracy and yumminess, and like they have to then interact with the recipients and try to, you know, make them feel good even though their burger is burned or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just making up, this doesn't have anything to do with these games anymore. I'm just like, takeout restaurant simulator.
Madelyn's just hungry.
I am hungry, and I'm gonna go get takeout for lunch. I really am. I'm gonna go to my weird local Indian place. I do feel like,
I think we came up with several decent starting points.
I think your first one is still the only good one, and my meditative taxi one, I guess, but...
Yeah. Those two are good, yeah.
Well, listeners, have you played Journey over its 10-year history? Did you find it emotionally impactful for you? Were you like, 0 out of 10, wish this game was longer? Have you played Citizen Sleeper? Are you interested in playing in Citizen Sleeper? What are your thoughts on the gig economy? Maybe don't share all of your thoughts on the gig economy with us. But if you have thoughts about anything that we've talked about today and you want to share them, you should hit us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games that are in the hat, we're about to pull some, and read our blog featuring long-running series Clickbait Boyfriend and Split Screen. There was a new Split Screen recently. Can you believe it? Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
And finally, and perhaps most importantly, if you enjoy Talk This, It's Dangerous to Podcast Alone, you should subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, wherever you can find podcasts, you can find Talk This. Next week, it's a side quest. It's our 6-week side quest. It's October. Yep. Can you believe it?
Nope.
So a good old Indigenous Peoples Day weekend, 6-week podcast, long weekend podcast. But in 2 weeks, what are we going to be discussing? What will we be playing?
For our old game, we will be talking about XCOM.
Mm-hmm.
And for our new game... it's finally time, Madelyn.
The Last of Us Part 1?
The Last of Us Part 1. I know you've been ready and raring for it.
I didn't actually start researching it, to be clear. I just thought, I was like, oh, that's going to be easy to research because I've already, read about it. Okay, great. Great. Man, which of those, do I even play either of those, or I pulled the same nonsense I was going to pull a couple weeks ago when I thought it was The Last of Us Part 1? And do I say, I played Part 1 of The Last of Us?
You could, I don't think you need to buy it. If you wanted to, download the free old version of The Last of Us and play a little bit of that on your PlayStation 5, I think that would be fine.
Oh, the end of the year is looming and I have so many games.
You don't have to finish it.
Oh, but
just refresh yourself on what it is.
It's embarrassing that I haven't. I make a joke about The Last of Us every episode of the podcast. Every episode, I'm like, The Last of Us invented storytelling, invented narrative.
Mel doesn't know what storytelling is because she's never finished The Last of Us.
I don't. What is a story? I don't understand. Well, listeners, that's it for this week's show. Thanks for listening. I'll learn what a story is in 2 weeks, so look forward to that. Emma, do you have a sign-off?
This week, I hope that you only have positive, silent interactions with the people that you meet.